Good morning, Europe. Welcome to the program. Our top stories this hour: Italy threat. Days before a migration summit, another boat gets caught in the middle of a political storm. We're tracking this breaking story with Alex in the Cube, our social media news desk.
Italy tells Malta to take the migrants and to seize the ship. We are speaking to the rescue team and we'll have reaction for you live.
Immigration confusion. Thousands of children separated from their families and detained in the U.S., and no one seems to know what will happen to them. Firing back. Europe slaps retaliatory tariffs on 2.8 billion euros worth of U.S. goods. And one big street party. I got a taste of the fun at France's yearly Fête de la Musique. Thank you for joining us this hour. We begin with breaking news, and Italy at the heart of fresh drama in the Mediterranean this morning, just days ahead of an EU mini-summit on migration. Weeks after blocking a rescue ship with more than 600 migrants, it is threatening to seize another boat carrying more than 200. Well, this is the boat in question, captured in these images last week in Malta. It's called Lifeline, and it is a Dutch-flagged rescue ship. Italy is now threatening to detain it and transfer over 200 migrants on board to Italian Coast Guard ships. And it comes amid confusion over the legal status of the ship. Italy's Interior Minister Matteo Salvini, he's taking a hard line.
This ship is going to see Italy only by postcard, not because Matteo Salvini is ugly, bad and selfish, but because if there are rules, they have to respect them and not play with human lives.
Well, for the latest on that ship and Italy's response, we head over to Alex in our social media news desk. Alex.
Tessa, welcome to the Cube this morning. We have been across this story, myself and our team here, monitoring all developments. Emmanuel, my colleague, just reaching out for the latest reaction, because the development in the last few minutes is Matteo Salvini has tweeted to now say Malta should take this ship, should take in the migrants, and then in the tweet saying the ship should be seized, that there can be no more traffic coming across the oceans. A strong line there from Matteo Salvini, pushing this problem over to Malta, saying the ship is in Maltese waters. We are waiting to hear from the rescue team and indeed the Maltese authorities. This, of course, is the ship. It is run by a German NGO, Mission Lifeline, and it has rescued over 200 migrants. But the point the crew are making is that they are a rescue ship. They are there to pick people up off dangerous craft, but they need to take them somewhere. They aren't a larger vessel that can keep people for a long time. So earlier, I asked the co-founder of the charity, what's next?
Well, the next step is we try to talk to other European countries to get help, because the people on board need immediately evacuation. It couldn't be that they are on the sea for more than 50 or 80 hours. It's many people get seasick, so it's a situation. It's not easy, but we need to stay calm and wait what happens.
Just one last thing. A message we're getting from Italy is that ships like yourself are encouraging people to make this dangerous crossing. So the Italians are perhaps saying that by taking a stern stance on your particular ship, they are dissuading more people from making this dangerous journey. The idea is you're breaking the rules. What do you think of that?
First of all, we rescued in international waters, and if you ever have been there, it's a huge area, and it's just a matter of luck to find a boat. So these accusations are completely nonsense.
Now, European leaders are divided, but so too are Europeans. There are, of course, the humanitarian voices. We're hearing, obviously, there from one of the very strong ones, the co-founder of this charity. But also, Giuseppe here has spoken to us this morning, tweeting at us. You can obviously get involved in the conversation yourself, saying Italy is not a migrant refuge point. He points out too, he says, you know, it can't be, he can't be allowing these taxis, as he calls them, coming into Italy. He says, well, why not about Tunisia, Malta or Spain? Why aren't they taking on some of this burden? And the hashtag here, close the ports. So this is dividing Europeans, it's dividing European leaders. We will have the latest reaction as and and when we get it here in the Cube. Tessa.
Indeed, a very thorny issue all around. Thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. And as we mentioned, this comes just days before a summit in Brussels on the migrant crisis and weeks after Italy blocked that rescue ship, the Aquarius. Our correspondent Annelise Borges was the only broadcast journalist on board the Aquarius, and she's also following the latest on the summit. And she's joining us live now from Paris. Annelise, good to see you there. Now, the French president, he's come out quite strongly on this. And let me just quote what he said about populism. He said, "It's a bit like leprosy all across Europe." That is his word. Italy reacted to that comment, didn't it?
Absolutely. Emmanuel Macron is saying that populism is spreading across Europe like a disease. He said certain governments are planting anti-European sentiment across the bloc and invited the French to fight against those, and I quote, who hate Europe. Because everything that is being said here in France is being closely monitored by government officials in Rome, those government officials felt personally attacked by those remarks by Emmanuel Macron and responded. They hit hard. They said that Emmanuel Macron is a chatterbox and that his stance over immigration is actually hypocritical, Tessa.
Yeah, and there's that draft agreement before the summit. Well, that has fallen apart. And what is supposed to be bringing European leaders together, it seems to be causing even more division. So what can we expect then?
Absolutely. There seems to be a disconnect here, Tessa, between those countries that we call arrival countries, those countries who have been the hardest hit by the refugee crisis, especially in 2016 and 2015 and 2016 because of their geographical location. Those countries that I'm talking about, of course, Greece, Spain, but also Italy, they have become in a way the gateway to Europe. And in the case of Italy, they are saying enough is enough. We need more help from Brussels. Now Italy is demanding compulsory quotas so that this burden that they have been receiving that is spread across the bloc. Matteo Salvini has actually said that he would veto any kind of EU deal that did not include these quotas. So this is a very hot topic here. This is a very difficult discussion, a very divisive issue. And this emergency summit before the summit next week was called in order to try and come and for these leaders to come to a conclusion, basically, so that they can actually come around the table and try to avoid what we've seen again and again, where they discuss, but the only thing that they can agree is to disagree on the issue of immigration, this issue that has actually revealed profound divisions within the bloc.
Indeed, difficult to see what kind of solution they can come up with. Thank you for that, Annelise Borges there. Well, in the United States, confusion reigns over another immigration crisis. Thousands of children in detention centers after they were forcibly separated from their families. U.S. President Trump this week backed off his so-called zero-tolerance policy over illegal immigration, but the controversy continues. NBC News' correspondent Kristen Welker has the story.
A soft touch with the First Lady on the ground.
I want to thank you for your hard work.
But a hard line on immigration from the president himself.
They're the worst immigration laws in the history of the world.
A day after the president retreated on the issue of separating families, there's still no public plan in place to reunite those roughly 2,300 children with their parents. DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen on Capitol Hill, unable to answer basic questions about their fate.
What happens to the kids now that have been separated from their parents? Why did you guys sign for the executive order yesterday? So we're implementing it.
President Trump defended his zero-tolerance policy, which is still intact, requiring all adults who cross the border illegally to face prosecution.
If we took zero tolerance away, you would be overrun you'd have millions of people pouring through our border.
Extending an invitation to Democrats to come to the White House and work on an immigration deal while lashing out at the same time.
They don't care about the children. They don't care about the injury. They don't care about the problems. They don't care about anything.
And taking fresh aim at Mexico, blaming them for the influx of immigrants from Central America.
They walk through Mexico like it's walking through Central Park.
Tonight, there is new fallout. In an interview with the Christian Broadcast Network, Attorney General Jeff Sessions acknowledging the political damage.
It hasn't been good. And the American people don't like the idea that we're separating families.
On Capitol Hill, protesters wrapped in thermal blankets imitating the images from the border demanded action as a conservative immigration bill failed on the House floor.
Kristen Welker reporting there. Now, the EU has just slapped revenge tariffs on iconic American products as a trade war heats up with U.S. President Trump. Well, the duties, which took effect at midnight, target U.S. imports worth 2.8 billion euros. The products range from Harley-Davidson motorbikes to sweet corn and bourbon. Well, the move has sent jitters through world stock markets, already worried by growing tensions over trade between the U.S. and China. And for more on this, let's head to Paris, where European Affairs journalist Stéphane de Vries is joining us from. Stéphane, the U.S., it's picked fights with its trade partners. You have the EU, Canada, Mexico, China. Can it stand its ground considering all these retaliatory measures?
Well, it's very unlikely. The United States are busy isolating themselves from what they always promoted as free trade, which is quite the contrary to the history of the United States. And by these retaliatory measures, the European Union shows that it knows how to hit Donald Trump, because we're imposing tariffs on motorbikes and whiskey, for instance. Now, you would ask, why these products? Well, actually, these are produced in important states for Donald Trump, like Wisconsin and Kentucky, for instance. And the EU wants to create a lot of political tension or pressure on Trump and its politicians. So it is a smart move, it's a political move, and it actually has nothing to do with real economy, because I think the Europeans, they of course they buy American whiskey and American motorbikes, but it will not affect them in their daily life. So it is a smart move by the European Commission.
Yeah, indeed. Just to pick up on that, it was largely a symbolic move, choosing these American products, which it's not really largely consumed in Europe. So, but how far can this escalate really with the EU?
Well, it can escalate very quickly, actually, because a trade war has no winners. It starts small, and then by retaliate, it gets bigger and bigger until the economy is really severely affected. However, it could also be a smart move by Donald Trump, because behind closed doors, the EU and the US are still talking about a possible free trade agreement between the two largest economic blocs in the world. Now, since Trump likes to be seen as a deal maker, he's running his country basically like he's running his businesses, it could be a measure to put pressure on the Europeans to get back to the table and to agree on very positive conditions for the United States. So it could be also a strategy by Donald Trump. But on the other hand, it could also be just a political move to show his own voters to see, I am America, I'm making America great again. But in reality, he is harming his own economy.
All right. Thank you for that. European Affairs journalist Stéphane de Vries. Thanks. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, a blueprint for Brexit. What will EU citizens living in the UK have to do if they want to stay there? Plus, as Turkey gets ready to head to the polls this weekend, we'll talk about what's at stake in this election. All that after a short break. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Our top story: after refusing them entry, Italy says it now wants Malta to welcome the 200 migrants on board a rescue ship in the Mediterranean. This comes just days after before an EU summit, that is, on immigration, and less than a week since we saw over 600 migrants disembark from the Aquarius in Spain. And with just 2 days to go to elections in Turkey, opinion polls are indicating a far closer contest than many had expected. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was on the campaign trail in the southeast of the country yesterday. He's seeking to extend his 16 years in power, but huge crowds have also been out in support for his closest challenger, Muharrem İnce, raising the possibility that the vote could go to a second round. And to analyze Sunday's vote, I'm joined now by Euronews correspondent Sertaç Aktan. Thank you very much, Sertaç, for joining us. Yeah, I think everyone is watching these elections. What is at stake here?
Well, Turkey is at crossroads, and stakes have never been higher. Now, what's being decided on Sunday is a new governance system, actually more than just a candidate or a party. But Turkish people are going to elect a president out of 6 candidates and decide a political structure out of 10 political parties. But this new governance system, infamously known as the Turkish-style presidential system, which is heavily criticized due to lack of checks and balances, is also being criticized from outside and inside of the country. Now, Turkish people already actually said yes to this system back in 2017 in a referendum with a very narrow margin of 51%. But all the opposition now is vowing and openly stating that they're going to reverse these constitutional reforms once they come to power. So therefore, the society is extremely polarized, and polls show a neck-and-neck race.
Yeah, and speaking about opposition, we just saw incredible pictures there of support for the opposition. But is there a real opposition in Turkey that can go against Erdogan, and are we going to see a free and fair election?
Yes, well, many critics believe that Erdogan will do everything in his power and beyond to get it done in the first round, because polls also do indicate the presidential election might go on a second round, just because the point you made that there is now some real challenge to him. Now, Muharrem İnce, as you pointed out, the secularist and the social democrat main opposition party's candidate, is on the second on the list. He's like 30%, over 30%. But there's also a surprise element. Meral Akşener, the only woman candidate who is a liberal nationalist, who many people believe should be facing Erdogan in this possible second round because she may get votes from Erdogan's base.
Indeed. Thank you for that analysis. We'll be closely watching this. Sertaç Aktan from our Turkish service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Political uncertainty in Iraq is set to continue after the country's Supreme Court confirmed that there must be a recount of last month's parliamentary vote. Allegations of fraud marred the poll, and earlier this month there were calls for a complete rerun after a fire at a warehouse containing half of Baghdad's ballot boxes. Nationalist cleric Muqtada al-Sadr and Iranian-backed militia chief Hadi al-Amiri were the surprise winners in the first count, but their attempts to form a government look set now to be delayed. And still to come for you, and good morning. Europe, after being caught in the middle of a political crisis in Europe, the Aquarius rescue ship is resuming its rescue operations, and we'll check in with the crew. And over in the Cube.
Social media certainly cared about this jacket, saying I don't care. Find out why after the break.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Our top story this hour, the new migrant ship raising tensions in Europe after refusing its entry. Italy says it now wants Malta to take in some 200 migrants. And this is happening less than a week since we saw over 600 migrants disembark from Aquarius in Spain. That's another rescue ship in hot water. Well, the United States is dealing with an immigration crisis of its own. There are thousands of children in detention centers who have been separated from their parents. Now, the First Lady, Melania Trump, visited one of these shelters, but it's what she was wearing, what was written on her jacket, that's catching attention. Alex, tell us what it's about.
Social media certainly exploded about this. We've had the hard line from Donald Trump, the no tolerance policy. So we had the First Lady going down to see some of those affected by this policy to offer a softer touch. But that wasn't what people were talking about. People were talking about the jacket Melania Trump wore boarding an aircraft to go down to Texas. You can't really see it here, it's a bit scrunched up, but let me pull up the stock image of that jacket. It says, "I really don't care, do you?" Now, people seized on this as somehow the First Lady sending a message as she was boarding this aircraft on her way to see a situation which the entire world has criticised, from the British Prime Minister to lawmakers in America to almost everybody in between. So a jacket saying, "I really don't care, do you?" Some people saw that as loaded with meaning. But one point I think we should make is that when Melania actually met with the children in Texas, you can see here she was wearing white. No sign of this jacket. She simply wore it getting on the plane and then getting back off the plane in Washington. But still, cameras are always following the First Lady, and so some people really see this loaded with meaning. Steve here saying, "I thought this was a fake or a joke." But Melania Trump actually wore a jacket on her way to visit a detention centre housing children that said, "I don't care." On the other side, though, Melania's press secretary said, "Look, it's just a jacket. It has no meaning at all. It's the First Lady wearing a jacket." The president himself seemed to ever so slightly contradict that with this tweet saying the jacket referred to Melania Trump's indifference to the fake news media, who he said wouldn't be covering her trip fairly. Either way, perhaps one positive that's come out of this is a fundraising site called IReallyDoCare.com, which has been set up in the wake of this huge discussion online, where people can donate money to charity causes helping children in these detention centres and to reunite families. So what do you think? Is this a non-story? Is it a distraction? Is it fake news? You can let us know using #TheCube.
Thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. Well, the Syrian government forces have pounded rebel-held areas in the southwest of the country. President Bashar al-Assad has vowed to win back the area bordering Jordan and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights say 12,500 people have fled rebel-held areas in the last 2 days. This latest offensive risks further escalating the 7-year-old war. Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthis say they would be willing to hand over management of Hodeidah port to the United Nations. The announcement is a potential breakthrough in a conflict that the UN has called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The Saudi-led alliance has promised a swift military operation to minimize civilian casualties. We'll have a look at all your top stories straight ahead, including the latest on that new migrant ship in the Mediterranean that Italy is now asking Malta to take in. Plus, a blueprint for Brexit. What do European citizens have to do if they want to stay in the UK? And the growing outrage of misogyny and sexism in the World Cup. But before all that, let's have a look at today's No Comment. Extraordinary images from Texas in the United States, where heavy rains are causing flooding. Welcome back to the program. A recap of our top stories. Italy threat. Days before a migration summit, another boat gets caught in the middle of a political storm. We're tracking this breaking story with Alex in the Cube, our social media news desk.
Italy has told Malta to take the ship and take the migrants. The ship's crew say they're nowhere near Malta. We'll have the latest for you in the Cube.
And a draft plan for Brexit. What will European citizens living in the UK have to do if they want to stay? Plus, one big street party. I got a taste of the fun at France's yearly Fête de la Musique. We bring you some breaking news now. With 2 days remaining before an EU mini-summit on migration, Italy is once again at the heart of fresh drama in the Mediterranean this morning. Just weeks after blocking a rescue ship carrying more than 600 migrants, it is threatening to seize another boat carrying over 200 people rescued from the water. Well, this is the boat in question, captured in these images last week in Malta, called Lifeline. It is a Dutch-flagged rescue ship, and Italy is threatening to detain it and transfer the 200 migrants on board to Italian Coast Guard ships. And this morning, Interior Minister Matteo Salvini tweeted that he'd asked Malta to take in the migrants, and he's been taking a very hard line on the issue.
This ship is going to see Italy only by postcard, not because Matteo Salvini is ugly, bad and selfish, but because if there are rules, they have to respect them and not play with human lives.
Well, that was Italy's Matteo Salvini there. And for more on the latest on this ship and what Italy is saying, let's go to Alex.
Tessa, as I say, we have some breaking news in that the Italian government have claimed this ship is in Maltese waters. This a tweet just from before 9 o'clock Central European time this morning from Matteo Salvini saying the ship is in Maltese waters. The Maltese government must take these migrants and they must seize the ship to stop it from carrying out future operations. Basically saying things must be carried out legally and safely. This has been Italy's stance on this, that this rescue mission has been unsafe. Well, this claim that it is in Maltese waters has been disputed by the charity operating the ship. Emmanuel here on my team this morning has been in constant touch with the co-founder of the charity. And he has just sent us through the log location, I believe, of the last hour of that vessel. This has also been tweeted by them. We are now working to verify the position of this ship to see if indeed it is in international waters, as they claim, or Maltese waters, as the Italians claim. You can keep up to date with all the latest on Euronews' Twitter and Facebook for the latest breaking news throughout the day on this. But earlier I spoke to the co-founder of that charity, the man disputing the Italian claim they're in Maltese water. And I said to him, well, what next?
Well, the next step is we try to talk to other European countries to get help, because the people on board need immediately evacuation. It couldn't be that they are on the sea for more than 50 or 80 hours. It's many people get seasick, so it's a situation. It's not easy, but we need to stay calm and wait what's happened.
Just one last thing. A message we're getting from Italy is that ships like yourself are encouraging people to make this dangerous crossing. So the Italians are perhaps saying that by taking a stern stance on your particular ship, they are dissuading more people from making this dangerous journey. The idea is you're breaking the rules. What do you think of that?
First of all, we rescued in international waters, and if you ever have been there, it's a huge area, and it's just a matter of luck to find a boat. So these accusations are completely nonsense.
So we heard there the vast area this ship has been covering. But if you actually look at the vessel, it's a small ship. And one thing Axel was saying to us this morning is, we are a rescue ship. We go in, we help people in acute distress. But now they have over 200 people on board this ship, and they are saying we need to offload these people somewhere. We need the help of either a transport ship or a port. Italy making their stance on this incredibly clear. As I say, we are reaching out to the Maltese authorities and verifying as best we can the location of this ship. We will have the latest for you on Euronews. You can stay up to date with us as well on Twitter and Facebook. As I say, it's a breaking story, a developing story, a divisive story. So let us know your thoughts on it. You can let us know using #TheCube.
Indeed, a thorny issue. And for the meantime, the countries are really standing firm on the ground. Thank you, Alex and the Cube team. And as we mentioned, this comes just days before a summit in Brussels on the migrant crisis and weeks after Italy blocked the rescue ship, the Aquarius. Political editor at Politico, Ryan Heath, has been following the latest on those upcoming talks, and he's joining us now live from Brussels. Ryan, this incident now in Italy, we're looking at it. What impact will it have on the upcoming talks?
I think a very serious impact. It's in Italy's interest that there are ongoing dramas. So to have this ship circling, to have a dispute about which waters it's in, it adds to the volatility and the confusion around the issue. And that's Italy's point, that in fact there has been a failure of EU policy. Either people shouldn't be getting on these boats in the first place, or there should be a proper pan-European burden-sharing system for rescuing people who are in distress. And clearly that doesn't exist when you have NGOs out there having to rescue people. And Italy has an argument that it is a little bit unfair that just because of where it is by accident of geography, that it bears the burden of dealing with a large number, if not a majority, of the people who are coming from North Africa and the Middle East. So Italy wants to push that point. It wants there to be drama. It doesn't want a pre-cooked deal. It wants to be able to go in and thump its fists on the table and make other European countries step up.
Yeah, and even more drama, because heading into the summit, there was a draft agreement. But now that agreement, it's gone at the request of Italy, and it was spearheaded by Germany. So where does that leave Angela Merkel?
That leaves her in a very precarious situation. In fact, ambassadors from all of the EU countries have now been accused by a Liberal MEP, a member of the European Parliament, who was involved in negotiating some of these files that have been put in the freezer. She said basically that the ambassadors, the national governments, were engaging in sham negotiations, that they never intended to complete this. Of course, Angela Merkel has domestic problems she's dealing with as well. She needs to try and show the Bavarian Christian Social Union Party that she's in coalition with that she's tougher on migrants than she has been in the past. But at the same time, she'd also look completely hypocritical if she just shut the door or reversed her policy, which was seen as very generous, very welcoming back in 2015. So Angela Merkel is basically surrounded here, and it's going to be a very difficult weekend for her.
Indeed, backed into a corner there. Thank you for that, Ryan Heath, the political editor of Politico. Thanks. And just 5 days after it helped to bring over 600 migrants to Spain, the charity-run Aquarius ship, it has once again set sail to resume its rescue operations. Euronews reporter Mark Armstrong has the story.
The charity-run ship Aquarius set sail from the Spanish port of Valencia on Wednesday to resume its role of searching and rescuing migrants in danger at sea. In spite of all the recent controversy, the crew are determined to carry on.
The mission of SOS Mediterranean is to continue being at sea. As long as there's a need with the Aquarius, we will be there.
The Aquarius brought migrants to Valencia after being refused permission to dock in Malta and Italy, reigniting arguments over how to deal with migration to Europe.
We leave the politics to take their responsibilities. We believe that these whole stories highlighted that politicians did not take their responsibilities and even breach the law, international maritime law.
Aid organisations are calling on European governments to put politics aside and reach a common agreement on migrants.
Mark Armstrong reporting there. Now, the British government says new rules for EU citizens who want to continue living in the UK after Brexit will be, quote, simple and straightforward.
Our positioning will be, our default position will be to grant status. And so we'll be looking to grant status as quickly as we can.
Unveiling the plan, the Home Office released this video explaining how applicants will have to register online to prove their identity, residency in the UK, and whether they've committed criminal conviction. Well, each application will cost £65. That's about €75, and half that price for children. Well, what happens to more than 3 million EU citizens who currently live in the UK? That's been one of the thorniest issues in the ongoing Brexit talks. And for more on this, our Belle Donati joins us now live from Westminster. Belle, how easy is the process, really?
Well, Tessa, let me show you. If you are an EU national living in the UK, the Home Office said yesterday that all you'll need to apply for settled status is one of these to prove your identity and one of these for access to the internet and a £65 or €75 application fee, half that if you're a child. Now, the idea is that you put your data and answer a couple of questions online or via an app that the Home Office is creating, and then the government departments do the rest of the work for you. They cross-check that against their data as to whether you've been living in the UK for the last 5 years, one of the conditions, and whether or not you have a serious criminal conviction, which could, of course, affect your application. The idea is to drastically simplify the current procedures for application for permanent residency, which involve an 85-page application form and 6 months of wait time, Tessa.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that sounds simple enough, but what's been the reaction so far to that?
Well, I've been speaking to the EU 3 Million group, which is a campaign group for EU nationals living in the UK. And earlier I spoke to one of their members, a French national. He told me what he made of the plans.
We're getting some good news and we're getting good starts, but I'm not very reassured, and I have we have a very few big concerns at the 3 million. For example, what is the legal support that's going to be offered to EU citizens for this application, and what happens in the odd events or the likely event with a 10% failure rate of the Home Office that settled status applications are rejected. And for me, it's very much a case of being able to just have the reassurances we need that in future the future government and even the current government renege on what they're telling us now. And we don't know what will happen in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, and we don't want to end up as another Windrush generation.
Well, that mention of the Windrush generation refers to a recent immigration scandal here in the UK in which the Home Office questioned the immigration status of thousands of Caribbean immigrants who'd been invited to the UK after the Second World War. But their landing cards had been disposed of in the interim by the Home Office. That forced the resignation of the previous Home Secretary, Amber Rudd. But to get back to reactions on yesterday's plans and announcements, as you might expect, the few voices that we've had from the EU have been focusing on the critical. The European Parliament's Brexit coordinator, Guy Verhofstadt, taking to Twitter to criticise the application fee, which he says ought to be set at £0. He says, why should EU nationals be punished for a vote of other people? Our teams in Brussels have been pushing EU officials and EU sources for a response on what their plans are going to be for UK nationals living in the EU. So far, tight-lipped from them. But what they have said is that any plan that they do bring out will be based on reciprocity. So I think we can see something coming out of the EU which will be not totally dissimilar from what we've seen from the UK, rather than a system based on visas.
All right, thank you for that. Belle Donati reporting there. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, we've got the latest from the World Cup in Russia, plus the growing controversy over sexism at the tournament. That and much more after a short break. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Your top story this hour, the new migrant ship raising tensions in Europe. After refusing it entry, Italy says it now wants Malta to welcome the 200 migrants on board the Lifeline rescue ship. And this comes just days before an EU mini summit on immigration and less than a week since we saw over 600 migrants disembark from the Aquarius in Spain. Well, to the World Cup now, and it's all gone messy for Argentina, with their stars failing to shine. The double world champions now depend on other results to go through. Instead, Croatia beat them in a stunning 3-0 game, taking them into the last 16 along with France. Today's game see Brazil looking to impress, Serbia looking to seal the deal, and Switzerland just staying, and Iceland versus Nigeria. Well, Peru, after 36 years of failing to qualify, have already fallen by the wayside and are going home. Now, sexism, it's been a talking point in previous World Cups, but this time there's one incident that's really getting a lot of attention and anger. Alex, what is this?
Tessa, the journalist who is at the centre of this, has widely shared the pictures, wanting people to see what happened and to condemn it. So picture the scene. Here is Juliette Gonzalez. She is a broadcaster for DW. I'll just let the video roll and talk to you about it. So here she is. She's doing a live broadcast in Moscow. She's talking about the scenes, jubilant fans all around her. The atmosphere is great. She's doing her job, reporting, as I say, for DW, when all of a sudden she is grabbed and kissed. Now, that hand was really controversial because where it was placed has been at the centre of this discussion as well. Either way, irrespective of where that hand went, people instantly called it out, including the broadcaster, DW, basically saying, sorry, but no. Kissing someone against their will is sexual harassment. Groping a woman's breast while she's busy doing her job is sexual harassment. This behaviour is unacceptable, they say, and it needs to be treated as that. They were calling for people to call it out. Now, this initially sparked a debate online. Was it a bit of a jovial thing? You know, people often jump on news reporters. It's happened a lot, but there was a really strong opinion base, certainly among women and younger people, saying, no, this isn't acceptable, and anything other than calling it sexual harassment is wrong. Well, the man himself at the centre of this felt guilty afterwards. He realised what he had done, and he actually sat down and did an interview with Juliette Gonzalez in which he apologised profusely for his actions. He says he wasn't aware of where his hand was placed, but either way, he says he was sorry and hopes that this never happens to her again in her career. So it's one of those incidents that has brought a rather an ugly issue of sexism and sexual harassment to the fore, but at least in this case, Juliette herself saying she doesn't want to be a victim. She wants to draw a line under this and actually wishes the man himself all the best. So a difficult issue, a difficult talking point, but at least for Juliette, she wants now to move forward. Tessa.
Indeed, it has gotten a lot of attention on social media. Thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. Now, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has rounded up her visit to Jordan by pledging an almost 90 million euro loan to the country. She made the announcement following a meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah in Amman. The money, in addition to almost 400 million euros promised in aid, is to help the country carry out economic reforms required by the International Monetary Fund. Merkel is on a 2-day visit to Jordan and Lebanon, where refugee policy has been at the top of the agenda. Both countries are bearing a heavy burden from the ongoing war in neighboring Syria. And today, Angela Merkel is in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. And following this visit is our correspondent, Jessica Soltz, joining us from Berlin. Jessica, what is expected to come out of today's visit?
Well, Tessa, Angela Merkel's visit to Jordan and Lebanon was supposed to concentrate on strengthening Germany's economic ties with these two countries. But this visit has been noticeably overshadowed by the issue of migration. It was a topic that Merkel discussed in detail with the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad Hariri, over dinner last night. And this discussion expected to continue today as Merkel and German business delegates meet their Lebanese counterparts and the Lebanese president, after which point Angela Merkel is expected to outline her support for Lebanon. And yesterday we saw Angela Merkel in Jordan pledging not only a very hefty aid package for Jordan, but also around 87 million euros equivalent of a financial loan. And this not only to help Jordan get back on its feet economically, but also, as Angela Merkel said, in order for the country to be able to house and look after the hundreds of thousands of refugees it's got currently living in Jordan. So Merkel promising diplomatic and financial aid to Jordan to boost its its ability to care for migrants on its own soil, of course at a time when Angela Merkel is under immense amount of pressure here in Europe to try and curb the flow of migrants coming into the European Union.
Indeed, Jessica, that is the point, isn't it? She's overseas right now, but she's dealing with a lot back home. And that EU summit is looming on Sunday and also next week. Has she reacted to the news that we've been following and covering here from where she is now?
Well, she spoke to students in Jordan and was discussing Germany's migration policy, and she defended Germany as still a very open country to migration. But she did also say that migration in Europe needs to be controlled. And this is the very difficult tightrope that Angela Merkel currently has to tread. The chorus of voices of European leaders and also politicians in Germany calling for tougher migration rules in Europe is growing ever louder. But of course, Angela Merkel did herself make the decision back in 2015 to have what's been called an open door policy to migration. It was a very important humanitarian message at the time, and she cannot afford to go back too much on this message, otherwise she'll be seen as undermining her own humanitarian values. So she's got a very difficult line to tread, and a very difficult weekend ahead of her, of course, with this mini summit coming up in Brussels, with the most recent criticism of her proposals for migration coming from the Eastern European countries, Hungary, Poland and the Czech Republic, who have said that they are not going to turn up on Sunday in Brussels. So a difficult time ahead for Angela Merkel to try and get EU leaders on side on the issue of migration.
All right, thank you for that, Jessica Saltz in Berlin there. And still to come for you on the program, I was at the Fête de la Musique. That's a yearly celebration packed with street concerts here in France. That's after a short break. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Welcome back to the program. Well, France's streets were filled with music as the yearly Fête de la Musique took place across the country last night. Well, I was lucky enough to be out on the streets of Lyon to take in some of the fun.
From orchestras to DJs, country singers, and everything in between. It's that one day every year when all of France becomes one big street party. For the 37th year, French cities come alive with free performances, thousands of them across the country.
What you'll find at the Fête de la Musique is diversity. Diversity in musical styles and the kind of people that come out to watch. I am here in the center of Lyon and it can't get any more diverse than this. I found myself a concert of the kind of music you don't often hear in France. This right here is French country folk music, and the people who are listening and watching are simply soaking it all in. A little earlier, I got to speak to the artist herself.
The meaning of Fête de la Musique is the share of those, the share of our music, of our hearts.
And that gives people a taste of music they might not have expected to enjoy.
I listen to rap music. I don't listen to classical music. So that's why I'm here.
It's amazing actually, because we can dance together, we can sing together, and it's allowed to bring your own instrument.
A day and night of music and fun, it's a tradition that people just can't get enough of.
Well, if you missed it this year, you can always come to France next year. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning Europe, and do stay with Euronews for all of your top stories. In the meantime, we'll leave you with today's No Comment and more pictures from that Fête de la Musique, and this time in Paris, where Emmanuel Macron attended the celebrations.
Like years away.